I appreciate our tourism community. I appreciate our hoteliers.
Don't you think it's time for the city of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? Let SCAB start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.
The following show and broadcast is a production of Better Savannah, an independent expenditure committee dedicated to better policy outcomes at the state and local level. The views, opinions, and statements made by the hosts and/or their guests do not necessarily reflect the views of Better Savannah.
Nice phone call right as we pop in. I love that intro there.
Yeah, I'm turning.
I hear you. If only you could get your email notification to do the same thing on your computer, we'd have some better recording audio. What's up, everybody? It's Thursday, May 19th. John's hard to believe, but it's episode number 86. Just simply titled "Cast Your Ballot." Last show before the primary. It's also going to be your last show for a while.
Yep.
You're going on vacation. You're ironically leaving the day of the primaries for vacation. So you'll be on a plane. I imagine I'll try to pop on here and discuss some of the results. But because it's the last show before the primaries, we just kind of wanted to preview the local and especially the statewide Democratic primary candidates. My chair is broken. I got to get a new desk chair here. It keeps losing its hydraulics. But other than that, I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome who will be guest hosting for you while you're gone over the summer here, the next month during June. It's none other than former statewide nominee for Public Service Commission and frequent ATR media platform host, RG Bryant. RG, welcome to the show. What's going on, man?
I am well. Good to see y'all.
Great. I'm so glad to have you. You have been a statewide nominee, and you're also heavily involved, like we are, in kind of the local politics and happenings of Savannah, Georgia. So first off, I just want to really say thank you for sitting down, for agreeing to co-host with us, because it's just a great opportunity while John is gone here, because there's going to be some runoffs, locally and statewide Democratic primary runoffs. So, folks, just for those of people in our audience who don't know who you are, just tell our audience a little bit about yourself, and your experience, and then we'll get into some discussions.
Well, yeah, and I appreciate. I'm glad to be here. I think what you all have done is raise the bar in regards to the conversation around policy, and we often talk about, well, how do we seek change? That change comes through policy. And how does policy happen? It happens when we put people around the table who advocate for a certain value or a certain community or a certain initiative. And so I'll kind of stop there. But I grew up in Savannah. In the West Side area, specifically Liberty City, which is District 5. We could talk more about that and this idea of regentrification of District 5 that we're trying to prohibit. Went to Windsor Forest High School, graduated from there, went on to Georgia Southern University, where I earned a bachelor's in PR and a master's in higher administration. Then University of Georgia, where I got a doctorate of philosophy in adult education, and studied diversity leadership. But most of my career has been in higher education leadership, where I've worked in multicultural affairs, diversity, fundraising, and that has been a great part of doing the work of understanding advocacy and communities that are often oppressed. But recently, not too long ago, ran alongside Daniel Blackman, who I admire tremendously, and had the pleasure of running with him, Senator Warnock, and Senator Ossoff as one of the Public Service Commission candidates. And so just really had a blessed life, come from William and Odessa Bryant, who are just phenomenal people, who are parents of mine, and just really glad to be here and share and engage in the discussion.
Well, we're immensely grateful, and we are part of a coalition, and it's really warms my heart, and I think effective, that we've been able to cross reinforce with the ATR shows, of which there's 7, 8, or 9 of them now. Right. Julius and yourself and those people are doing a fabulous job. I think it's a good example of people who share the same goals, which is policy, and we understand that to get policy made, you have to have the votes on your government, who has the power to affect policy. And well, the 2019 city election was a breakout moment in the history of Savannah.
You're reading my mind, John. I wanted to kind of start the conversation off, RG, with the fact that we started, John, we started this organization almost 2.5 years ago now. Okay. Yeah. In 2019.
August, September?
Yeah, September of 19. Okay. And I almost feel bad, because it's like we started off and we endorsed 7 candidates and we went 6 for 7. Okay. Meaning 6 of the candidates we endorsed went on to win their elections. Now, we know what happened to some of them after the fact. They kind of went away from the policy agenda we all agreed to. And then in 2020, we had a very mixed bag. We had a very much, big turnout, COVID election, anti-Donald Trump wave. And we kind of lost some elections. Last year, in some special elections, we had mixed results. Kind of a wave election in Port Wentworth, some tough losses in Tybee Island and Garden City. And so far this year, we have only endorsed one candidate, and that's Ann Allen Westbrook for House District 163, who appears to have the momentum and a broad coalition of support to secure that primary win, after losing by only 19 votes to Derek Malo, who is the front runner. So I just want to start off with, RG, it's to me, the lay of the land has been tougher than I expected it to be. If you had asked me in January if I thought we were only going to endorse one candidate, I would have said no, we would endorse more. Right. But it just hasn't played out that way. And I'm interested in your take and we'll start this conversation with the local stuff, and then we'll move
Okay.
to the statewide stuff later on in the show. But I want to specifically, I'm thinking about a couple of races.
Okay.
You know, the 163rd, the Senate District 2, Lester Jackson's seat that he's vacating, the school board president's race, you know, and maybe a handful of other races, maybe Carl Gilliard's district race, you know, but you know, the elections, the campaigns did not materialize in a way where, you know, we felt we could make a difference in a race, and that the people running, you know, either were very close in terms of their skills and their talent, what they brought to the table, or, you know, just the cross currents weren't really in our favor. And, you know, the turnout is not really impressive so far in Chatham County compared to the rest of the state.
Mm-hmm.
What are some of your opening thoughts? I'm going to pull up the early voting so far.
Okay. Yeah. I understand what you're saying about the candidates and the candidate pool. And, you know, I think one of the things that could have been different is having candidates really present who they are and sharing more depth about what they want to advocate for, change, or what their visions are. And I'll look specifically at, you know, the school board president race. I think you have two good candidates out of three. I won't go for any further than that. But one in particular, I think, has a very, very good vision, has a very good package, has a very good message, and really could do some good work. But I think with all the chopped up different debates and how they were arranged, you really couldn't get the meat and potatoes from those individuals to see what they really were about and what they were going to advocate for. And some of the tough questions weren't asked. And I think that was across the board. Even in 163, should there have been a debate? Should there have been a time where both candidates could have shared more? I don't know. But I think if the voters really learned more, that could have inspired or been more of an inspiration point to say, you know what, I'm going to champion this particular candidate. But let me look at those numbers because I have not seen those yet.
Yeah, so this is GeorgiaVotes.com. This is a pretty reliable, you know, primary source for voting tallies in kind of day-by-day time. So far, this is as of yesterday.
Okay.
Close of business yesterday. 14,173 people have voted in Chatham County, representing just 6.3% of registered voters. For those of you who listen to this as a podcast, on the screen, we've got, you know, kind of the early and absentee return ballots. Now, 16,000 ballots were requested, and only 1,372 absentee ballots have been returned. So I would imagine those numbers will rise pretty dramatically in the coming days going to Tuesday. But those have to be returned by Tuesday at 7 p.m. or else it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
We are considerably lagging behind the metro Atlanta counties in terms of turnout. And RG, to me, that's a reflection of the quality of candidates we have running locally. You know, I think across the board. Let's stick with that school board president's race.
Okay.
I agree with you. There's two good candidates. I think Roger is a somewhat divisive candidate because of the campaign he's running. And I was pointing out to someone the other day, you know, this is the first time we've had a school board president raise $250,000 for that race that I can remember.
Yeah.
And if you look at the history in Savannah, Chatham County, candidates who raise biggest amounts of money do not have a good track record. Eddie DeLoach, $250,000, lost to Van Johnson. Carol Bell, $240,000, lost to Keisha Gibson Carter. I mean, that was a 10-to-1 financing edge in fundraising in that citywide race. Jason Buelterman raised $300,000 for county commission chairman, lost to Chester Ellis. I'm just pointing out that there's not a good track record there of candidates who have the most amount of money in these big marquee races. And I kind of view Roger among that same kind of trend of, you know, kind of overselling an agenda, overselling a platform to the point that you're just, the market's saturated with what you can do to move the electorate. So, you know, Todd Rhodes is probably one of the most amazing out of the blue candidates I've seen. Just kind of coming out of a year ago, I had not heard this man's name as a
Right.
potential candidate for anything, let alone school board president. My honest evaluation is that is a person who should have run for a district office first. That was the same criticism that people like I had, for Ty Whiteley 4 years ago. Right? Was, really good candidate. You probably should have ran for a district seat first, and, because of her running countywide 4 years ago and getting 19.25% of the vote, she has the base to run countywide this time. Right. And so since there's no better candidate in the race, they are hitting each other naturally. So I've got this race. I'll let you interject in a second, John. I've got this race with Roger Moss getting 45 to 47% of the vote in the opening round. And, that leaves 53 to 55% of the vote left. My thoughts are that Ty will finish second, but it could be anywhere from a, 35-20 second and third to, 30-25. 29, 26, 28, 27. It could be close, between them two. I do think that somebody who has a base of 19.25% of the same electorate 4 years ago probably has the advantage into making that runoff. John, what were you going to say?
I wanted to, you brought up something that caused me to wonder. We have very experienced and many very good representatives, in my opinion, on the school board. Tanya Howard Hall, Dave Brinkman, etc. Why do you guys think that we didn't see a candidate emerge, as you were referencing? We have candidates that probably should have run for a district seat running for the presidency. Why didn't we see one of those seasoned, reasonable, and fairly successful representatives step up?
Well, one in particular you mentioned, and I won't call their name because, and I asked this individual, and I asked, and I believe the response, I think part of it is, and this is my assumption, is while the leadership is there and needed, sometimes it's, am I really wanting the headache that goes with it, right? Do I want to do the extra meetings? Do I want to interact with the chamber? Do I want to do all of the things that really I don't have to do as a district person? And I'll go back, let me, I think really that's the nuts and bolts of it. I mean, I even at one time was considering District 5, right? For school board. But given, some people were like, well, why don't you run for school board president? Well, I don't want to really have to deal with all the stuff that comes with
that's that. That's a 50-hour-a-week job.
It's right, and
it's only $49,000 a year salary or whatever. It's not like it's a, it's not part time like district positions are.
Well, here's the part too. It's there's this real dynamic of how do you interact. Like I am a supporter of Dr. Levitt. I think the superintendent's role is important, and I look at the school board in a different manner than maybe a Joe or someone else. And so I look at it in a very different lens. And so, you think about that in the long-term longevity and sustainability of your career in the public space, and could that create an issue in the long run? So there's all of those dynamics that play out too, I think.
Let me answer your question another way, John. Okay. We saw in 2014, an out of the blue talented candidate kind of come out of nowhere and win the school board presidency.
Jolene Byrne.
Right. Yes. Okay. And that 4-year term was a struggle, to say the least. Absolutely. Some for deserved reasons, a lot for undeserved reasons. I think you're referencing like Shawn Kachmar and Dionne Hoskins-Brown, right? I think that's really the two leaders on the school board. Michael Johnson, maybe to a certain extent, yeah. I mean, he's running for re-election to his second term. All three of the other people are already in their second term.
Okay.
Right. So like in terms of seniority, Connie Stokes, Dionne, Shawn Kachmar are the most tenured on that board. And so, but Shawn and Dionne are young enough and pretty good leaders that they would have been natural fits, I think. I think it says a lot about the current dynamics of the politics of education, social emotional learning, critical race theory, whatever it is you want to call it, right? You've got.
Do you think the system is stunned by the 2 years of COVID and
Oh yeah. RG, don't you think public education is taking a beating in terms of its approval ratings over the last few years?
I think I would say yes, in the sense that I think we have a lot of leaders at certain levels that don't understand K-12 education. They're not in it for the right reasons. For example, there should have never been this online learning thing for kindergartners and young. Kindergartners basic skills are not taught online. That irked my nerves. Why would you put an online environment around that space? It's why I'll put a name out here. It's why people I think Tanya Howard-Hall would be a great school board president. She was a school teacher. She understands the dynamic. She understands learning, and she's been in the space of leadership. And so I think when you miss opportunities to have leaders like that, you got these folks now that are making decisions that make I never understood the fact of the catastrophe that was created in Chatham County and around the world around this online piece and making it the all savior to learning. It was a ignorant movement.
Gotcha. I know we don't want to eat up too much time on this, but one more question: the Roger Moss campaign has these tinges of anti-administration. Am I misreading that? I mean, he's parsing it with a big smile, $1 million smile, and a avuncular demeanor. But if you boil it all down, I think Roger wants to get in and really go to town on the administration. I don't know if he'll have the votes if he is elected, but do you see any of that in the rhetoric and the discussions?
Well, I'll share this, and this is not fact, but there are rumblings as well. Not only that piece, but the advocacy around charter schools, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it can become an issue when you position that against public schools and the efficiency and effectiveness of public schools. And so that piece, those pieces are out there.
Yeah, no, it's coming. A lot of that is hidden behind the charter school mandate. But okay. What do you got next, Chuck?
Well, I want to transition from the school board to State Senate District 2, because one thing that is very astounding is some similarity in some of the donor money. So, RZ, I mean, look, I want to preface this conversation with that. Again, we don't have an endorsement in this race. I think either one of these candidates would make a decent state senator. But we're in a big fight, in terms of this candidacy, right? And some of these filings for State Representative Derek Mallow, there's a lot of questionable money. I've got 2 new filings just since the last time you and I talked, right? And on this 2-day business filing, let me share this on the screen here. I just want you to see, what just popped up here. Now, 2-day business filing, for those of you who don't know, is when you raise a ton of money at once, you're required to do an extra filing to the state. So let me keep blowing this up so everybody can see it. So this is a 2-day report from Friends of Derek Mallow. So Jeff and Leanne Cole, these are business people. Look at this one right here. Look at this one right here, John. Plant Riverside LLC.
That's Kessler. Yeah.
That's Kessler. That's Richard Kessler.
Deja vu.
Okay. That's Richard Kessler dipping into this state Senate Democratic Party primary. It's one thing in a general election, I think, to be taking money from all sides. But this is a primary. RG, I've been wanting your take on this for a while. Give me your take here.
Yeah. Well, and this is the thing. So I never had a primary when I ran, which was a blessing. But I'll say this, and this is a great discussion to have. So you're running a race, right? And at this level, okay. So do you take the money? And one, are you aware? Which I would say, yeah, you're probably aware. But do you take it or do you deny it? In a race, I would say it like this, and I would love y'all's feedback. I would definitely take the money, understanding that I don't owe you any favors. Now, that's got to be very clear on the front end. I think the problem people get into is, okay, so you're going to give me X amount of money, and then whenever I have a major issue, you get access to me to have a conversation. That on the front end, that's got to be clear that cannot occur. And so I think if that is made very clear that, sure, I'll take your contribution and your support, but that doesn't guarantee any kickbacks. And so if that's made clear, cool. Right. But if it's not made clear, you got a problem.
Well, I guess if this individual wins and his voting is respectable, reasonable, and in line with your aspirations and views of better policy, no harm, no foul. But
Quentin Marlin, extreme Republican attorney, very, very Republican attorney.
There's a ton of
Brett Hume from the labor people, a lot of who's who on here, on these disclosures. Sam McCatchern, Thomas and Hutton, Chief Executive Officer. Thomas and Hutton, this is a company that we call a legacy contractor in the city of Savannah bidding process. And these are the types of companies who bid low and then submit, 17 million change orders and rip off the taxpayers to make more profit. I will say, now I want to be fair. There's a lot of trial attorneys on this list. And trial attorneys are historically Democratic Party donors, okay, mostly because of tort reform. So this isn't I'm not calling Derek Malo out saying that this is all Republican money. I am just speculating that it's interesting, it's intriguing that there's this much inside ball player money. Dale Kreitz Jr., big time Republican. Paul Hinsey, these are big players. These are powerful people. Or as one former, I'm not going to bust out. I can't say the source on this one. As one current elected official told me, these are Dave Simon's clients.
Many of them.
Right? These are donors associated with David Simons. And I have already pushed the newspaper into editing a story about this candidacy because they ran an article where they quoted Dave Simons as just a valued local political consultant with an unbiased viewpoint. And I want to just show people, who the number one itemized expenditures are on these lists. It's Simons and Associates, right? $3,000 a month.
And we talk a lot about holding candidates accountable. What it does now, it keeps our eyes on the voting record and the advocacy and what comes from this seat. Because, if the voting and the advocacy are not aligned with the things that need to be done, then we got some questions in a few years.
Right. Well, we're just going to have to wait and see.
So I put the link to the ethics in the, in the chat, guys, to the ethics page. Look, there is, you could go look at our filings. It's mostly me and John. John's retired. I'm a banker. We're pretty transparent in what we're trying to do. And again, I'm not accusing this candidate of being non-transparent. What I'm saying is that when decisions get made, like about the weeping time, or about the hotel motel tax, or about the charter of the city of Savannah, these local delegation issues that what I'm referencing, RG, if decisions get made that are questionable down the road, this is what you point to.
Yeah.
This is the marker.
You're right there.
And senators have a lot more power in local legislation.
They're the last line of defense, is what they've been called.
Exactly.
Okay.
Well, it goes back. It goes back to this mayor, and I think there was a fundraiser held a couple of weeks ago, and people were up in arms, and then you had people wondering, why are you up in arms? Well, when you have a community that offers those many resources, it does raise eyebrows, because it's like, well, were you aware? Did you have these conversations? And if you did, fine. But hopefully those conversations ended with, I owe you nothing. Is one of the reasons why you see some campaigns like my own. I mean, we did a darn good job on a shoestring budget, but it was very much, we were on the backs of general mom, pops, and dads and taxpayers. And everybody doesn't like that kind of a campaign. That's fine, but you gotta keep the people accountable behind their votes. So you get all the money you
exactly.
want, what are you advocating for?
My fraternity brother here in the comments going, yeah, like what specific policies these donors do they want?
Right,
passed?
exactly.
Right, like that's exactly my point. You know, if you spend $10,000 in political donations, but you get $1.5 million in government contracts, I mean, that's money well spent. That's a
good return on investment.
It's a decent ROI, right? It's called civic recapture.
Well, and here's the thing. Here's the thing that we will be keeping an eye on, specifically in District 5. And I can tell you, we got many of folks with the coalition and the CCDC and other groups, is that how well will you protect District 5? How well will you protect the MLK corridor? How well will you protect Weeping Time? Those small things, that's gonna really unveil what we're dealing with.
Yeah, and I mean, look, again, I think that Derek is the front runner. You know, I've told everybody, like, look, I think he's been a very decent state representative in his first term. I don't have anything to point to yet. All I know is if we're going to be up in arms about Van Johnson and Roger Moss with these donors, if they're popping up on your disclosures, you know, what's good for the goose is good for the gander is the phrase, right? You know, it can't be these rules for this candidate, but not for me. Right. Yeah. You know, like I'm not going to hold Van Johnson to this level of scrutiny and then give a pass to another candidate just because he's in a delegation race. Why? What kind of consistency is that? You know,
that's real.
So
that's real.
Again, I'm not saying that there's a vote publicly I can point to from this state rep that shows he's, you know, quote unquote bought and sold. And, you know, I wouldn't say he's sold out yet. I'm just saying, you know, the price seems to be high because this guy has raised $75,000 for a state Senate seat.
Just think of it as a storm watch alert. Okay.
Yeah.
It's not a full blown, you know, shelter in place deal. We're not saying that. We are saying that the conditions are present. So watch what happens and be prepared. So,
but go back to that comment that Rebecca made. Let me tell you what I learned today. I was in a space where I learned a lot about the owner of Title Max. I did not know that individual was that deeply in resources.
Right.
I mean, deeply in resources. I was like, oh.
Yeah,
Gulfstream is their friend. Let's just say that.
So now that we got, because I mean, look, locally, the only other thing locally I was going to say was, you know, obviously we're supporting Ann Westbrook. You know, she's a very talented candidate that we believe has paid her dues. You know, her opponent has not run a very successful campaign. In almost everybody I know in politics in Savannah's opinion, Wesleyan Mahogany has not run a great campaign in terms of the issues. You know, I know she's got a great history in this community. And I do think that that's important in our candidates, but these are powerful positions. These are trying times, and we need candidates that are going to tell us where they stand on the issues of the day. And I think that the race is still going to be close. And I think Wesleyan should be a great candidate for a future office. just like Ann Westbrook ran 2 years ago. If you go and look at her original interview with me on this platform, it's like episode 30 or something, very closed off, very, very non-committal to a progressive agenda, very questionable about this platform and this type of committee, right? I think she learned from that mistake and, became a better candidate the second time around. And that's what I want to see happen for the losing candidate in that race, the only race we've made an endorsement in. Do you have any thoughts about that race, RG?
Yeah, I think, again, it goes back to what I started with is I don't think the candidates, I think Ann did a nice job of presenting her information by getting on podcasts, so forth and so on. And I wish Mahogany would have done the same thing and getting on. I don't think she has shared her message, or like, some of the others have had a chance to share their message through a debate or on podcasts. But I think, again, in the future, and I tell all candidates this, even when I did it, you're either going to get out there and talk to the people, or you got to find a way to talk to the people. And you got to create your own space or figure out, how do I get my message out there? Julius will tell you all day, and I've learned this from him, signs don't win an election.
No.
You getting out there and being in community, talking to people, knocking on doors, speaking on these podcasts. Until a person hears your message, they're not really inspired. They like you. They'll support you to a certain extent. But if I don't know where you, like you said, if I don't know where you stand, it becomes very difficult to make a decision on which direction I need to go in.
Yeah, it's an incomplete palette. Great history. Just not enough policy. It's not personal, but the absence of policy positions really makes it tough. So I would encourage all these candidates that failed to embrace and articulate their views on policy to start doing that.
To answer this question, yes, I can see Wesleyan doing it. I can see Todd Rhodes running for city. But let's transition to the statewide, because John, you're a local institutional memory. But this is a great panel, and I see George's face here. This is our great friend in Atlanta. Subscribe to the Atlanta Objective Substack, one of the most read independent news journalists in the state of Georgia, probably in the Southeast at this point. George Chidi, and I wanted to bring you guys on because George, RG is a former statewide nominee for Public Service Commission, is from Savannah, very knowledgeable in this primary process, even though you didn't have a big statewide primary, RG. We've got obviously no contention at the top. I mean, I think Warnock has an opponent, but she's not going to do very well against him. Stacey Abrams has no opponent. But beyond those two races, there's kind of a free-for-all in the Democratic Party. And George, you put out a list of some names. There was a lot of pushback immediately when you put out the initial list.
It was, because I made a couple of mistakes.
You made a couple of mistakes we heard about. And so I want to start in the lieutenant governor's race in the Democratic Party. There are 9 candidates running for lieutenant governor. And an interesting point you made, George, was that women are playing a very pivotal role in the Democratic Party right now. So this race seems to me to be Renita Shannon versus the field.
Yeah,
is that fair? Is that fair assessment?
I would not be shocked to see Michael Owens. I think it's Michael Owens in that one. So
no, he's in the Secretary of State. No, it's Eric Allen.
Yeah,
it's Eric Allen.
I'm thinking
Kwanzaa Hall. Kwanzaa Hall is in this race.
Oh, to hell with Kwanzaa Hall. Like, all right, I'm sorry.
I love your approach.
He's a friend. Like, this is the irony is I like Kwanzaa Hall. Like, he is a friend of mine. I will shake my hand. I will break bread with him. I will help him. I would walk his dog. But he's fishing for a seat at this point. Like, he should not be running for this job. Like, and it's because he had his moment where he was like a congressperson.
A congressman for 24 days, right?
24 days. 24 days. And he gets to be a congressperson, like a former congressperson for the rest of his life, which is cool. I would do that. That would be cool for me. Like 24 days and then out. Like, and I get the credential. Like, but that's it. Like he was a county commissioner and or a city council person in Atlanta who ran for higher office, lost, and has sort of been floating out in the wilderness. His wife's a county commissioner in Fulton County, and like made a play, sort of got it, not really, and now he's here. Like I think he was looking at running for a Gwinnett County, like a county commission seat in Gwinnett County, even though he had been a city council person in Atlanta. And I'm looking at that like you're don't get me wrong, like I actually think he's a solid public policy head. He's a policy nerd, just like all of us.
As a party insider, I'm sympathetic to Kwanzaa's argument that the state party should not have been able to insert its chairwoman as the nominee after the death of John Lewis. Like I'm sympathetic to that, but like
don't start me with that too.
You know what I'm saying? Like, and that doesn't mean that you should be popping around for all these races either.
Well, the party needs to stop being so favoritism driven. That's the first thing. I think, the reason why we continue to lose state and major offices is because the Georgia Democratic Party is focused on, people are going to get mad when I say this, is uplifting the Kima, and that's where we end. That's not what the state party should be doing.
So I was just sticking with this LG, Lieutenant Governor's race to start with. Okay. On the screen right now is Charlie Bailey. He was the 2018 nominee for Attorney General, George. I know you know this. It was for our audience. And he, just switched on a whim this year. Started out running for Attorney General again and switched on a whim into this seat. Now, I want to preface this question with George. A couple of weeks ago, another political leader in the Savannah area, Pastor Leonard Small, one of the major spokesmen for the Weeping Time Coalition, major leader in this area, He does a podcast on Saturdays called Tell It Like It Is about, local and state politics. And a couple of weeks ago, he had an episode where the title was the Stacey Abrams primary, meaning candidates in favor with Stacey Abrams and her political machine's perfect ticket, so to speak. And I want to talk more about this when we get through the other races, but this seems to be the biggest example of, we want some white people on the statewide ticket surrounding Stacey, whether or not they're qualified for this position, whether or not they're the best person for the position, the best candidate.
George, what you going to say about that?
Yeah. All right. Do you remember, I want to say it was 2014 when the Democratic Party put up a slate of essentially 5 black women. And it was a big deal internally with the party. Some of those folks were really solid. Some of them were not, had no business being on that ticket whatsoever. But it was lauded as this is progressive. This is we're speaking to the base. We're speaking to the needs of the base Democratic voter. Like in black women, we're upholding black women. They got creamed. They got smoked like salmon. It was bad. I don't think they dragged it down the top of the ticket. I don't. But I don't think they did anything for it either. This sort of rigid identity politics. So yeah, I could see Stacey Abrams seeing that lesson and going, if I'm at the top of the ticket, I need some balance here. And like you say, all right, I need a white guy over here. I need a black woman over here. I need a white woman over here. Do we have an Asian, anyone? Latina.
Be win. You got to be win.
Latino. And representation matters, but identity politics don't always resonate when that's what it looks like. And I know some people, particularly locally, who were considering running for some of these jobs. And they were like, yeah, but they'll never vote for me because I am and then fill in the blank, because it was because I'm black or because I'm white or like because that was the wrong person, because it looks like they've got a slate.
Well, and with that, so you have Stacey and you got Kemp. Does that open a door for someone like Shane Hayes to come in and really do some damage?
You mean like the libertarian Shane Hayes?
Yeah, like pushing the governor's race to a runoff.
Or really making some,
I wouldn't be shocked if Hayes pushes this to a runoff.
Well, I mean, if David Perdue gets 34% of the vote, right? Where are those people going? Are they going to stay home? Are they going to vote libertarian because of the personal animosity? Yeah, that's where RG's getting.
Look, if this goes to a runoff, Kemp's cooked. Like, I'm actually looking forward to that. Like straight up. And I've spoken to Shane Hazel, and I actually think he's probably worth 3 or 4%. And that wouldn't have been enough 6 weeks ago. The abortion question that is going to come down in a few weeks is going to fundamentally alter this race. Like, you're looking at suburban white women who were drifting back into the Republican camp. We're going to because
10% inflation, 10% inflation is pushing those voters to the Republicans. Yeah. Joe Biden's 34% approval ratings, pushing those voters. And now all of a sudden, this one decision. So last week we had Melita Easters, the founder of the Win List, on the show, because, of this leak, the Supreme Court leak, and this issue, it's going to fundamentally change the dynamics. But where does that leave, these primaries? So after the lieutenant governor's race, I think the next most fascinating primary I'm seeing is the Secretary of State's race, in my opinion. So this is the one, you've got B. Wynn, very talented, energetic, young Asian American legislator, right? Massive advantage in fundraising. Michael Owens, also very young, very energetic, a guy I've known for a long time from the Young Democrats organization, ran unsuccessfully for Congress against David Scott, who probably might lose this time. I mean, John Eves, head of the largest or second largest county, in Georgia, Fulton County chairman, big time name in Atlanta politics. That race is surely going into a runoff. You sort of said B's kind of the right pick in this race. I'm interested in your take on that.
So here's the thing. Let's start first with the political pedigree. She's absolutely part of the Stacey Abrams clique.
Big time.
She was one of Stacey Abrams' people. Then when Stacey Abrams ran for governor, B. Wynn walked into her seat. This is just, it's there's a relationship there that matters. Yeah. But when all of the stupid Stop the Steal stuff was going on, B was the loudest damn voice in that, with the possible exception of a state senator from DeKalb County, I might add. B was the person who was countering misinformation. She was doing the math and digging up the numbers and showing this is how this worked. This is how this worked. This is how this worked. No, you're full of shit. And there are going to be clips of that she can run, and that other people will push. There's none of the other folks have that sort of. None of them are going to have that backstory. Has not one goddamn thing to do with the fact that she is an Asian woman. That's cake. That's frosting. It's not relevant. I think she can give Raffensperger a run.
I
for
agree.
His money. I think Raffensperger's going to win.
I'm a John Eves guy, but I agree with you.
And I say that because John Eves, God help us, his vulnerability is the Fulton County Board of Elections. Oh, wait, you were the chairman of Fulton County all those years when Fulton County couldn't quite find
Richard Barron, that name. Richard Barron runs pretty deep in Atlanta, the former head of the elections division. for that county.
Like-
I understand what you're saying. But, I mean, there's a lot of people who might say that there's vulnerabilities in all three of these candidates. I mean,
absolutely. None of
the rumors around these candidates, George.
I understand.
I just want to say, I mean, there's people saying that the front runner has a Casey Cagle problem. Okay. I mean, I'm not saying it's not something
don't put it down that bad.
Look, okay. John McMaster, John, you're old enough to remember, the 88 elections, like Gary Hart, right?
Yeah.
I don't give a shit about people's personal lives. I really don't.
I really don't either.
But the voters do.
Too far with that. I agree. I totally agree.
But the voters do, George.
Is that the dalliance with?
I think this is just
flowers.
Like this is a conversation that needs to be like. I can't be the person to start talking about this.
Four dudes. Yeah, surely four dudes are going to be the people who come up with the nuanced response to these type of things. I just think, everybody should do their research. Let me put it this way, though. I do think all three of the candidates, the major candidates, Michael Owens, John Eaves, B. Wynn, they all have some strengths, some weaknesses. I think B's got the least amount of weaknesses probably, but they've all got some weaknesses, George. I mean, I think there's going to be a runoff in that race, though.
Oh, definitely.
This is true. Like there will almost certainly be a runoff in the race, and we'll see what happens after that.
But
like I'm sort of thinking about because we don't fundamentally know what's going to happen with the Republicans yet. I'm pretty sure that Raffensperger will pull this out. I'm pretty sure he's going to pull this out.
Probably from Democratic crossover.
Never mind how. Yeah, maybe. But holy shit, a Republican's going to be pissed off about that. Like a substantial minority of the Republican vote, maybe 40% of Georgia's Republicans, 20% of the electorate, are going to look at that like he stole it for himself.
Yeah.
They're going to look at that and they're going to say he stole it for himself. And then the voices of none of these elections are legitimate are going to start rising. Probably out of Marjorie Taylor Greene's area.
I forgot about that nutcase. And Chuck and John, if we could, I think really if we could talk about the next one, I think is really, really important to folks is that PSC, the 2 seats there. I didn't even know we had 2 seats.
I want to get to the PSC, but I want to go. I want to jump to Labor Commissioner next because George, you put out a shout out for Nicole Horn, okay, and Nicole seems to be another one of these candidates handpicked by the DNC / the Abrams folks. And, remember, this is a show, on and about Southeast Georgia, coastal Georgia, Savannah, Chatham County. Why is diversity, why is the geographic diversity not valued in Atlanta? Where is the love for our boy, our hometown guy, State Senator Lester Jackson?
So part of this is because of there's absolutely an Atlanta bias. And maybe I bought into it because I kept running into Nicole Horn, and she is indefatigable, in ways that I have very rarely seen. I see that maybe in the Atlanta mayor. She's got that level of energy, and she's a down ticket candidate, where that kind of energy is going to be what's necessary to pop your head up over the cloud. If it comes down to the PSC race last year, 2 years ago, where we lost that, even though we won the statewide, we lost that thing by what? 15,000 votes?
20,000 votes, I think it was, yeah.
And I'm looking at it because we have the most qualified candidate. I'm having an aneurysm. The 20,000 vote, and it's not that he wasn't energetic. The irony is that his opponent knew how to keep his head down. It didn't jump up and down and scream.
Well, his opponent was 84 years old. I don't think his opponent had the ability to lift his head. Very
Well, it
high.
goes
No
back to what I
no
said.
offense, Shawn.
We've got to have a party that gets away from handpicking candidates and figure out our voting base and getting the voting base energized. I think our state party has got to really hone in on how do we've got Chatham County, for example. We could win every election Democratic if we only had people that come down and strategize instead of handpicking candidates.
Yep.
Well, I don't think, like, because here's the thing, Fred Swan's going to win that fucking primary.
You think
Swearing,
so? Do you really believe so? You sure
Yeah,
win for Dukes. So
I
now
really
we're talking
think
about
so.
agriculture commissioner. Fred was the nominee 4 years ago, did very well. You know, very, very great guy. Another person I've known a long time. But you got two other candidates in that race, you know, who are going to garner significant support.
They are going to garner significant support. Like, I'll put $50 on it right now. I think Fred Swan wins it.
I think it goes to a runoff, but I hope you're right.
I've got to ask a question.
It probably goes to a runoff, but yeah, he's going to win it.
John, what you got, John?
George, you wrote on your Facebook page, Fred Swan is the guy for Commissioner of Agriculture because I firmly believe he wants to grow perp in Georgia. What is perp?
You'll figure that out in
Like a
California.
cheap rug.
You'll figure it out in California.
The guy who's flying to California is asking you what the perp is. That's funny.
Right.
Do you think we've got a chance at that under a Republican assembly in the next couple of years?
Yeah, I do. And I think that the key to winning that race, the key to being the agricultural commissioner in Georgia is being able to loudly argue in favor of marijuana legalization. Like at the top of his or her lungs. Like, because the electorate.
Because of the industry.
Do it.
Yeah, we're losing money.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's jobs, but fuck it. Like, people want to smoke. Like, I do not imbibe, and that's beside the point. Like,
I love Georgia already.
This state wants to grow marijuana. The state wants the industry, but they also want to indulge. Like, there's a culture for it here. And
yeah, we need to loosen up.
Tired of getting it when you can
That
go
will
to
help you.
California and not do it and not have to work. Like, and so I think it's like one of the so much of politics in Georgia, in America, are so partisan, where there's like, you know, Republicans X and Democrats believe Y, and never the twain shall meet. There's actually kind of a consensus around weed. Like, and the only reason that Republicans oppose legalization is
where's the Libertarians of Effingham County page in the comments? You're like they normally are on our show. I know that they agree with us on this issue. Let's talk RG briefly, because I know George is running on fumes, and George wrote a really big story recently. So you're correct. I don't know about that, but I want to discuss this PSC race because you were a former nominee. Tell us what's going on in the Public Service Commission primaries.
Well, you know, I didn't know that. Well, first, let me back up. So you got District 2 and District 3 on the ballot. Let me tell you what they did in District 2 for the viewers. So Patty Duran, who is in one area of District 2, announces she's going to win. The Republicans go and redraw the lines and drew her out of the election. How bold can you be? But as I said, Democrats, sometimes we get too weak, and Republicans show you how to have power. So they draw her out of the race. She had to figure that out. I'll leave that alone. I don't want to tell too much business, but she's back in. So we want Patty Duran in District 2. But then you got District 3. You got three candidates. I think Chandra Farley is going to pull that out. Chandra, both and Patty I've talked to and talked with extensively. Both of them have an energy background. They both have strong knowledge of what they're doing and the policy they want to advocate for. And they are both against Georgia Power, and they both are against that stupid, cancer-causing Waynesboro disaster called Plant Vogel. So I hope both of those win. And I'm telling voters, you've got to get out. If we can change the narrative there, Daniel said this years ago that what changed Georgia red was those PSC races a long time ago, a few years ago. If we want to change Georgia black blue, I think it's through this direction, and we gotta vote down ballot. That's what messed us up. And if the parties did this right, all of these candidates would be fine. But I go back to what George said earlier. Is there's no way you had a Warnock also bloop that ends it and everybody else goes home. We're not doing a good job somewhere.
I agree. I served on a board with Patty Durant for a while. We were both on the Beltline Rail and Now board, like an advocacy organization looking for Beltline Rail in Atlanta. Patty Durant is like a super hyper nerd. She's a hyper super duper nerd. And she is also like indefatigable is my phrase for the day because I am not. She just phone calls, emails. She's relentless. She's a relentless fundraiser, I might add, which is useful. But I don't know if she's got the Rolodex. Like, we'll have to see. But she knows how to do it. Like, got moves. That's a good thing. It's just that race it's so partisan, even though it's not partisan. Like, people vote down that thing because they care about making sure that Democrats are in office up until, not because they have some nuanced sense of, this candidate believes in like reducing fossil fuels by 15% over the next 10 years. And I'm like, nobody's walking to a voting booth with like stuff like that going on. Are you a Democrat? Yes. All right, I'll vote for you. Like,
or I will never vote for you, depending on where you are.
Yeah.
I want to just play briefly this clip before we jump into this story that I believe you're kind of the number one source on in the country right now, George.
Thank you, Chief Bryant. Today, I'm with the Atlanta Police Chief Rodney Bryant.
Can you guys hear that?
As well as my
a little louder.
Sheriff Patrick Labatt. We are here today about a grand jury indictment that was returned that included not just Jeffrey Williams, which is of some notoriety and media attention, but about 28 defendants that operated within our community between the time period of 2012 and 2022. It is our allegation that they operated as a criminal street gang and commenced to do havoc in our community. That havoc includes crimes of violence, crimes of thefts, crimes involving drugs. I've made no secret about it, nor any apology that as the district attorney of Fulton County, my number one focus is targeting gangs. And there's a reason for that. They are committing conservatively 75 to 80% of all of the violent crime that we are seeing within our community. And so they have to be rooted out of our community. I said just a week or two ago, it does not matter what your notoriety is, what your fame is. If you come to Fulton County, Georgia, and you commit crimes, and certainly if those crimes are in furtherance of a street gang, that you are going to become a target and a focus of this district attorney's office, and we are going to prosecute you to the fullest extent of the law. I agree with Chief Bryant. What you see yesterday and what you will see in the upcoming months and years is the result of a lot of hard work by both the Atlanta Police Department and this office. We are proud to bring forth this indictment and hopefully to bring justice to a lot of the community who was victimized through the course you see in this indictment. But more importantly, the most important thing that we are here to do is to keep this community safe. And we believe removing these 28 defendants will keep Fulton County safer.
Of course, I got it. The ad popped up. But is this the one where you jumped a question in at the end there, George?
Actually, I asked like 5 different questions during that thing, including the Jack Harlow question, I might add. That was me.
Yes, yeah. Is Jack Harlow. Go ahead. On the screen for our podcast listeners is the Atlanta Objective, the Substack that George runs. Highly worth every dollar to subscribe. Highly recommend that you do that to get a good idea of what's going on in Atlanta if you want a perspective. But the title of this May 10th article of yours was YSL Faces the Music. And you have been following this story for some time now. Is that right?
Yeah, I started looking at it in like June of last year, something like that.
So Young Thug, Gunna, these are all rappers.
I mean, they've been investigating these guys for years, but like these are all rappers. Young Thug has 3 #1 albums to his name. Like he's got I think it was a Versace model at one. He's been on Saturday Night Live. He's Gunna, who's the #2 guy in the outfit, has had 2 #1 records. Like he's like very popular. And then there's sort of like a bunch of also ran guys, starting with Yak Gotti, that and Lil Duke, that are known locally and have had some music that's charted, but aren't really in the same. They're not at the same level. Thug and Gunna are superstars. This is the equivalent of busting Snoop Dogg in 1990, whatever. It's a big deal. It's also a big deal because it means that the district attorney of Fulton County is perfectly willing to try to prosecute millionaires in the name of getting street crime down. The street violence, homicides specifically, are going crazy in Atlanta. 3rd highest rate of increase in the United States. And that's her ass. If she can't figure out how to do that, she's screwed. There is a parallel here to what's been going on in Savannah. Savannah street crime is also spiking. It's not making the news because it's Savannah, but Savannah's got a policing problem that's significant. Yep. It's deep. Yep. They're like Savannah has like their morale is crazy low. They're having a really retention problem, and it's getting people killed. And I don't just mean gangsters killing each other. I mean cops killing people because they're understaffed and they don't have other options.
Exactly what he's saying.
Yep.
You know, they're like the object lessons of how the district attorney is trying to approach things in Atlanta may be instructive, assuming she gets it right. We're not there yet.
So how much of this, George, you mentioned about it's the DA's ass if she doesn't get this under control. Yeah. You hear from Brian Kemp and especially Chris Carr, I would say, the Attorney General, you know, that gangs are the #1 problem in the state of Georgia. You know, this is the rhetoric. You know, Carl Gilliard, one of our local state reps, state representative Carl Gilliard, is one of the premier Democrats who works with the Republicans on this anti-gang type of legislation. And this type of press conference from Fulton County District Attorney Willis, you know, kind of, let me ask it in a better way. Do you think she is parroting this language about the gang issue because of the risks elsewhere in her office, a la the Donald Trump investigation? Or do you think this is what Fonnie Willis really believes?
So I think it's complicated. Like the first thing is, Fonnie Willis does believe that there's a gang problem, and she might even believe that it's 75% of the violent crime. She might believe that because that's what the police are telling her. The police, however, may just as well be. How much profanity can I use on this show?
As much as you want. I don't give a shit. I really don't. I know other people do.
All right. So gang violence is a major part of the violent crime problem in Atlanta. It may be the largest portion of violent crime in Atlanta. It is in no way 80% of the violent crime in Atlanta. That's horseshit. That is straight garbage. But if you told me 40%, I'd believe it.
That's still a huge number.
And 40% is a huge number. Like 40% is pay attention, fix this shit. Like if you can turn 40% into 20%, you win.
Yeah.
Like that's so the why they exaggerate this shit is beyond me. Like, and they'll say, no, we're not. We're looking at the numbers. And then I look at their fucking numbers and their numbers don't match. And I said, give me your numbers. Give me the numbers that match this. And they can't do it. Like that said, like the street gang problem in Atlanta is real. It's substantial. Like I was skeptical when she said 50 dead bodies, but over between 2015 and now, for this one gang beef between YSL and YFN, 50 dead people, that's 6 or 7 a year. Yeah, it might be because I can count 6 in the last 5 months.
What are they doing appropriating Yves Saint Laurent's initials?
Man, it's because it's cheap branding. It's like a gang that decides they're going to wear an Angels hat.
Yes.
Perp, baby, perp.
The Young Slime Life.
It's like what's the rapper from the West Coast said I used to think LL stood for Love LA. It's just like romanticizing certain random things,
iconic random
in
things.
the culture. Okay. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. But let me ask you all. Let's position.
Go ahead, RG.
Here's a place to advocate for. I can't remember what West Coast state did this. I want to say Oregon. But what they have done is essentially focus most of their resources on violent crime. I do not understand with the pandemic that we have, why in hell would you put an officer out there to write a damn ticket for a red light when you got somebody 3 blocks down who could be getting killed right now because of some foolishness? I don't understand why we don't retool. I mean, there's got to be a real life solution other than business as usual.
They did. Like Atlanta.
Atlanta's done it right. Savannah, we don't have the brain power down here.
I'm wondering, Savannah can't be over relying on ticket revenue.
There's no leadership. That's what it is. There is zero leadership. That's bottom line.
It's all the sales tax money, George. It's all the sales tax money we're relying on from the tourism.
Here's the thing that I'm worried about. So Brian Kemp is going on and on about how he's created this what do you call it? Crime prevention unit in the state patrol. And that state patrol has stopped 20,000 motorists over the course of the last 18 months or so. They've made maybe 250 arrests, give or take, on that order of magnitude. Maybe 27 of them were murder charges where there was a warrant and they picked somebody up. But that is stop and frisk. That is effectively stop and frisk. It is not qualitatively different than what New York did that got them into all sorts of trouble that was completely ineffective.
The only difference is the cars, is the motorists versus the walkers.
And because there's a constitutional right for a police officer to stop a car basically for whatever they want, you get 20,000 stops. And I really want to see the racial breakdown in that. The State Patrol has instituted a chase policy that Atlanta had discarded because it was getting people killed. And lo and behold, the State Patrol's chase policy is getting people killed. But we're not discussing this.
George, we're over 20% down from our budgeted number of police officers in the city of Savannah. Over 20% down from the budgeted number.
Yeah.
And the ones that we have are all rookies to less than 3 years of experience for the most part, right? So when you talk about, this puts organizations like ours in a quandary, George. Okay, on one hand, you got the folks who are on the left of the spectrum that are just deep on the police. Let's burn it all down and restart it. But it's if we don't have a well-resourced, well-trained, well-run police department, we're going to have excess officer-involved shootings. There's just no doubt of that correlation in my mind. Am I off on that? Because we start sounding like we're conservatives, like we're some right-wingers talking about we want a fully staffed police department, or even better. Let me tell you the worst one. And John, I want you to explain this to George, because Atlanta is not as specific a tourist destination, but it is a tourist destination. It's not specifically branded as such, like Savannah is, or Charleston is, right? So George, our police department funding and officer number is based on 10 years ago census number of 155,000 residents. Okay. On any given, especially Wednesday through Saturday night, on any given Wednesday through that Saturday night,
No,
there's an additional 60,000, 80,000, sometimes 100,000 people in the service district, right? I mean, when you think about tourists, visitors from the regional area, the homeless, students that aren't counted. I mean, you know, between the three universities, we got 25,000 students in the area, you know? So like, you know, we end up sounding like traditional, you know, a law and order, you know, kind of Democrats or Republicans from a throwback generation, just because we're trying to say like, hey, you should base this police staffing on the actual service district, not just the census.
Yeah, and then see what you get.
So we're 100 officers short of the budgeted number, and the budgeted number is an additional 150 officers short of what you would need. They say that you need, what's the number, John? 3.5 officers per
1,000 people.
Per 1,000 served in order to have community policing. In order to have effective community policing, at a minimum, you have to have 3.5 officers per 1,000 people served. We're at 2.0, 1.8, 1.9. That's effectively rural Wyoming and Montana coverage.
We should have 735 officers.
Yeah.
If we had anything close to YSL or YFN, you know, in Savannah, there'd be 100 bodies a year here. Luckily, these kids aren't real. The gangs here are not as well developed as they are there. And the kids here, as I've been told, don't know how to shoot a gun. You know, I mean.
How many cops do you have in Savannah?
Okay, we have. Okay. The budget is for 625, but 100 of those people are not sworn officers. That's just salary budgets. Okay.
Analysts and support staff.
So, George, 525 is the budgeted real sworn police officer number. We only have 415 right now. We should have, if you do the math, there's a 210,000 population or service district.
Okay.
Times 3.5 gives you 735 officers plus 100.
So we're almost 300 officers short of where we should be.
And there's an easy fix to that. I think, and I've seen this like in Athens. Give, and I don't know, they may have this, John and Chuck can tell me better, but that means in that type of crisis, you give the university's officers jurisdiction as equal to the Savannah Police Department officers.
So that'll
you got to figure this out some kind of way.
50 or 100 there. That's not bad. But they probably already have that.
Maybe.
I would hope so.
So here's a laugh. Like DeKalb County, which has a coverage area of about 500,000 people. Like, because there are cities that have their own police departments. So
right.
Unincorporated DeKalb has about 500,000 people in it. Its police department is running at about 650 police officers sworn.
Wow, you should have 1,700.
Yep, we're fucked.
Yeah.
And crime is starting to catch up. Like, we actually somehow managed to avoid the blip that Atlanta had, but it's starting to catch up because the blip is spreading out.
Here's another fascinating. Let me throw this at you, George. Fulton County DA Willis has approximately 12 or 13,000 backlog cases in her office.
Yep.
Is that right? Is that number right?
If it's probably right. It's also an improvement, if that believe it or not.
Do you know how many are backed up in our DA's office in Chatham County?
I'm afraid to ask.
Over 31,000, George.
Oh my God.
31,000 backlog cases. And the way I've been describing this, and again, George, I start to come off and sound like this, like country club Republican or something. And I'm sitting here going, 31,000 backlog cases. That means there's like 300 criminals walking the streets of Chatham County right now that should be serving state time. Because out of 31,000 cases, it's like needles in a haystack, right? Every one of those cases, there's duplicates. There's stuff that's going to get nolo contendere. There's a bunch of probation cases in there. There's a bunch of cases that'll just get dismissed eventually. But when you break it, when you boil it all down, you're talking about 250 to 300 criminals that are just caught up in a system that there's not enough resources to prosecute them. And what chance does an underfunded, understaffed, undertrained police department have against that flow where you have arrested a guy for a crime and you still see him on the street 6, 7, 8 weeks later, just committing more crime?
It's been the long-standing problem in Atlanta, like a big political problem too. It's what people were running for public office on, saying they were going to fix this, except you can't fix this by any means other than increasing the size of your state and superior courts, so like you impanel another 30 judges, and then you need like another 100 prosecutors, like, and if you're paying each one of them, and I'm going to be nice here and say $75,000 a pop, like they probably don't make that much, but whatever, like 75,000 times 100 is 7.5 million, like plus whatever you're paying the judges. And so
drop it. This is not an astounding amount of money in the context of a $30 billion state budget, in the context of an assembly and governor who gave a $1.5 billion back to the citizens this year, to people like John McMasters and I, who don't really need the money. Even honestly, George, even in past years, you probably would say I wanted the money, but even you probably don't even need that this year. What did $500 do for your family that the crime doesn't undercut?
2 years ago, I'd be like, give me the money, but now I'm okay. There are people who are hurting for whom that will be a good thing. Honestly, though, they don't vote Republican. I don't know what the fuck this is about. I mean, honestly, like if $500 changes your life, you're probably a Democrat.
Hey, you're all right.
Fuck.
That's real.
It's the politics of it.
That's real.
All right. I'm gonna have to bounce in about
I know you do. I know you do. Just finish your thought on I just want you to finish your thought on this public safety issue, because we are driving this as a big issue here in Savannah. I mean, Mayor Van Johnson has got to be feeling the heat on. I mean, we've had a police chief on staff in 3 years who's never had a performance review. Think about that. We have a police chief who is on a month-to-month contract right now, no long-term contract, no performance review.
Half the people don't like working for him and don't trust him.
Over half of the officers have publicly signed their name to a letter. I know that we sent this to you, and it's just like, I don't know how to move the needle on this issue anymore unless one of our favorite guests, Kevin Grogan, who's a retired police officer or a former police officer here, he always says that, Savannah doesn't move unless, a pretty white girl gets murdered. I mean, do we just have to wait for that moment? How sad is that?
Fuck. I don't even want to think about that.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah. That's sad.
Yeah, so you could protest. Like, you could just take this public, like, in more than just chat rooms and newsletters, but get the local media and be all like culture jammer about it. Like, can you imagine a left-wing protest in favor of more police services and more prosecutions? But I mean, the craziness of that.
Yeah.
But if you got like because the folks who are suffering here are poor and Black in concentrated poverty in Savannah. Like, that's who's
you got a Black city council, George, and a Black man.
Black county commission, a Black DA, majority Black judges.
Surely that's enough. And surely that's going to do the project. Like,
the bottom line is this, and I've said this many times before, George, and in other forums. It's time to get a police chief that's from Savannah, who knows Savannah, who cares about the issues, and who understands how to fix these problems. It's time out for bringing folk from New York and other places. Let's get a police chief from this city and stop looking outside. And in particular, and I hope she doesn't get mad, and I said this on other shows, Julia Tolbert would be an excellent choice.
Okay.
She's been here. She knows it. And, talking about morale, when a person who sees someone who comes from their ranks rise to that role, in my opinion, I think you will get a different approach and a different vibrancy that can make a difference. But this mayor won't do that. He doesn't have the nuts to do it.
We'll see. Gentlemen, it's been.
Thank you so much, George. Go get some rest. We'll hit you up in the runoffs in the summer and maybe have you back on again. Okay.
Thanks, man.
Thanks so much. Oh God, always love talking to him. What a fascinating perspective from our good friend George Chidi in Atlanta. Again, if you want to subscribe, go to the AtlantaObjective.substack.com. Worth every dollar for the content you're going to get exclusively on his feed. RG, I think I really appreciate you coming on the show on short notice.
That's been great.
To help us out while George was stuck in some traffic earlier, and I'm just really looking forward. I'm going to start reaching out because basically what we talked about earlier about the statewide primaries, we know there's going to be a bunch of runoffs. Right. So I'm looking to do, 3 or 4 forums, via StreamYard here in the runoff for Lieutenant Governor, Secretary of State, Labor Commissioner, maybe Agricultural Commissioner as well. And so I'm just really looking forward to having you participate in that. And then, John will come back hopefully well rested and
and with some perk.
What was your saying last time, John? It was taqueritas and dispensaries. Please do again. Feel free to send us a few missives from the road. Video style when something, especially if something big comes up. I do want to just real quick before we end the show. I just want to stop and I want to push back on this debate on our pages and on your page, John, about the changes on Savannah Morning News. Okay. For those who have been, this is episode number 86 of the show. Okay. And probably one of the most frequent recurring characters in terms of a political character in this town that has been a recurring topic of discussion has been Adam Van Brimmer. And what we saw this last week, John, is a radical shift from the direction of the newspaper in terms of its opinion and editorial section, in that Adam will no longer be managing that section and will just be a regular recurring columnist, like, say, Bill Dowers, right? I noticed, and I sent you the podcast today for the commute podcast they have, their main podcast. Yeah. And the interviews, John, were conducted by Peoples and Habersham, for the Recorders Court candidates. So I don't suspect there's a direct correlation between projects like ours or ATR or Unity in the Community. I do, however, believe that I said this to you in private a couple of days ago. The sum of the parts is greater than the whole. What I mean by that is that the collective efforts of everybody on the local progressive coalition is not only pushing governments to compromise, like, for example, the city of Savannah hiring Jay Melder as city manager, big compromise there, pushed by groups like us. But private industry and the media seems to, for at least some part, responding to the market trends. And if we're going to have conversations about everybody should join the Chamber of Commerce to change the direction of that organization, this is the same concept we're talking about here. I just think we're making an impact, and I've never seen so many positive pieces in Savannah Morning News the last 3 months about issues we care about. I've never seen it before.
Yeah, absolutely. The writers they brought in with Zoe and Drew and the old standbys, Will Peoples, and they're trying to reclaim some territory in this market, which was badly damaged by a consecutive year after year shitty endorsements that wound up losing over and over again. And then for the swan song, they endorsed Trump. At that point, the newspaper was all pow, man, it was done. So they sold it, and fortunately, we have some bright lights now happening there. It ain't perfect, but it sure is changing direction, and we just acknowledge that. So I welcome
Well, look,
it.
guys, it's been a fascinating election cycle. This is, John, I mean, this is our fourth cycle of, elections going through with this project, and, it's really evolved, and I'm interested to see, where things go in the runoffs here. And, we'll be glad to have you back in July as we shift towards the general elections in the fall. RG, you got anything else?
Oh,
Before
no,
we
just
wrap up
travel.
tonight's show?
Well, no, I think great show. I think great conversation. You got to have George back. I love his energy. I love the no nonsense types. I just love it. I think we need more of that. I would love to see him and Alicia on a show together. That'd be perfect. But John, both of them are just high energy, and I love both of them. But John, you travel safe, and see y'all next week.
Travel safe.
See you next week.
We'll be back next week on Thursday for a post-primary wrap-up show. We'll see who's won what elections, what runoffs, and we'll start prepping for some statewide runoff primary debates and forums. So thanks for stopping by, and we'll look forward to having John in the audience instead of on the screen. And we'll see you guys next week for episode 87. Thanks so much.
All right, now.
Don't you think it's time for the city of Savannah to have an honest tourism management plan? That scabs start paying its fair share? And the hospitality industry needs to increase its wages? The impacts of new growth should not cost residents. All local elected officials on council and commission should have term limits. We're working hard to accomplish these policies. We need your help. Please contribute whatever you can, $5, $10, or $20, by going to bettersavannah.org. Donate. Thank you.